I was the second employee of the very first social media platform of the time. It was called 6 Degrees. Being part of a high growth enterprise is not for everyone. You have to have a certain constitution. If you made a big decision, you couldn't fail fast. You failed slowly and painfully because there was no taking it back.
So Shoshana, for 25 years, you focused on strategy for some of the largest companies, like even Audible before Amazon bought it. Now you're in this fascinating position. So Converge is a 60-person marketing company that a bank took over and just handed it to you to restructure it. So Shoshana, take us back to that moment when the bank actually handed you the company and had you rebuild it. What was that like?
I think it was nothing like I expected in advance of taking this position. So what I would say is I'm a growth hacker, and so I'm usually attracted to challenging opportunities that demand more than just keeping the status quo going. So I knew it was going to be challenging. I knew I was walking into a situation of founders and management that had not really focused on growth. But I was unaware of the state of the existing business. That's, I think, what was the big surprise, right? So if anybody has been in marketing services and advertising agency world, it's all about new business because the lifetime of a single client is not really something that's always so predictable. So I assumed I would be walking into a portfolio that was solid and stable, and then I just had to bring a new business, which is what I've learned how to do throughout my, you were kind, 30 years plus of working at larger agencies. What I found was that the lack of growth was not just around a discipline, it was around the culture. And so the client stability itself was also a little bit shaky. There wasn't as much of a growth culture in the people. People came in and they did their job and they went home, and they didn't really seem to be inspired or motivated to do any more, to ask questions. So I think that there was a sobering moment of recognizing that what was on my plate was maybe a little bit more complicated than I originally imagined. It didn't scare me, but it definitely gave me pause in that what was really going to be important is for me to first understand what does the existing business look like, what needs to be done to fortify that before I could ever start to think about bringing in new revenue.
And what made it so shaky? Like, was it like an acquisition problem, like a retention problem, an upsell problem? Like, where were the bodies?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I like the way you phrase that. I think, again, in services businesses, and I would say this is not unique to advertising and marketing, most of the stability of existing revenue is directly tied to the relationship you have with your client. And I think that if the culture of the company is not looking at every single time you get on the phone or walk into a room with your client, that you're not somewhat repitching the business, then over time, the relationship that you like the relationship you have with the client becomes more transactional and less based on trust, confidence, and the real sort of value that you deliver as an expert in your industry. And I think what had happened over time, and we have several clients that have been with the company for nearly 2 decades, which is unusual. But I think that, when you get into decade 2, you're like, okay, I guess they're going to be with us forever. And maybe the sort of the core discipline around, for example, meeting with the client and doing a quarterly business review, bringing them new ideas, pushing them into certain directions that would not only be good for their marketing, but good for their business, you start to sort of, I don't want to say just phone it in because that's not really correct, but you start to be more transactional about it, more delivery focused. And I think that what I was noticing is that those relationships needed to be shored up in 2 places: on the ground, like in the actual work, but also from a senior position, establishing relationships between, for example, myself as the CEO with their CMO, right? Most of the work gets done at a director or manager level. If you're not investing in a relationship that those people report up to, when things go bad, you're going to be the first, expense to be cut. So there was sort of shoring up that needed to be done, I would say, from top to bottom. I think there were some clients that were in much better position than others, but it required me to sort of dig deep, learn, and see what was going on and address those in real time.
And so what kind of things did you do to improve the relationship? Like, was it like free strategy advisory, like investing in free projects, like land and expanding? Like, what kind of
Yeah.
stuff were you doing?
I think all of that in many ways.
Yeah.
I think the first thing one of the things that I did as part of my discovery and onboarding, let's say in the first 2 to 4 weeks, is have actually on my first day, I asked for an account review of every single existing client. So the person that was running that business needed to give me historical revenue, the relationship that you had, ups and downs, what they thought the strengths and barriers to entry were. And I asked them to rate the relationship on a 1 to 5. And so it allowed me very quickly to get a read on which of the patients were bleeding on the floor versus ones that can be addressed later on. And so we took the ones that felt that were most at risk, and we did an analysis of who was working on the business, what the cadence of communication was with different levels of seniority, and are we walking into the point you brought up with services or IP, ideas of the way they could grow their business outside of what was being delivered to them directly. So immediately there were a couple of clients that I met for the first time, even though the previous administration hadn't really had individuals at the senior levels get involved at a client at a certain level. I felt like this was the best way for me to A, learn the business, but B, for that client to feel cared for, and that we were more than a vendor. We were really a partner in their growth.
So yeah, okay. So let me read this back, make sure I'm understanding it. So you guys took a look at all the clients and you said, hey, which ones are at risk, poor health, right? Or which ones are good? And you took a look at the ones that are at risk, and I imagine ranked by revenue, right?
By revenue and profitability.
Profitability, right? Okay. So you look at the highly profitable ones that are at risk, and then you kind of meet with the team to give more meet with a client to give more strategic advice. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing we did is learn, what is it that's making the relationship at risk or weak, right? Is it the quality of what we're delivering? Are we not delivering it in a timely fashion? Could we be delivering it, to your point earlier, with more services wrapped around it so it has greater, more sustainable value? Then questions like, what kind of relationship do our senior folks on those pieces of business have with the client, the individual client, the person on the other side? Because the deeper those relationships are, if my job ultimately is to make the senior director of marketing look like a superstar within her organization, if we didn't feel like we were delivering that, that was a problem, right? So a true sort of getting under the hood of the strengths, weakness, like the SWOT, the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for an individual piece of business. And then I worked with the lead account person or the lead, whoever was in the position of the most seniority on the client. And we put together a plan of what are the things we could do immediately to shore this up. Things like going in and doing quarterly business reviews where you're not only reporting out on past performance, but you're providing real strategic insight into where they should be going in the future, whether we were going to be delivering it or maybe things that they could be doing without us, right? So really trying to instill that we were more than vendors, we were business partners, and we were thinking about their business outside of the realm of what we deliver every day.
Interesting. So tell me a bit more about how, like, you use SWOT, it sounds like a lot. And I know you're a very strategic person, and so I'm hearing you say you use SWOT at the individual piece of business level. Um, why should someone like in what situation should someone use SWOT, and why does
Right.
it make sense in this situation?
People have pro con lists, people have all kinds of ways of navigating the world. I think those of us who see themselves as strategic thinkers, and I don't mean this in any sort of judgmental way, I think we are by definition seekers, intellectually curious, and um, wanting very much not to make decisions without it being informed by what's in front of you or maybe what's not in front of you. And so SWOT is one way. It's not the only way, as you probably know, where in a relatively short period of time, in a highly focused way, you can do a diagnostic assessment of an individual client relationship in this case. You could probably do it in of a department or a line of business, right? In a larger organization. I also did a SWOT of all of Converge, like to be honest, as a business. So when you do a SWOT, it's a way for you to cancel out all the noise around a certain situation and hone in and focus on those things that are ultimately either driving growth or impeding growth. So what are the intrinsic strengths that we can speak of with this relationship? So for example, clients that have been with us for more than 10 years, that's a strength, right? Loyalty is obviously a key foundation of that relationship. What's a weakness? A weakness could be that the client that you were working with for the last 5 years just left to take another job, and now you got to impress somebody new. That would be either a weakness or a threat. So I think that like having methodologies like SWOT, and again, there are others that allow a leader to quickly do a strategic assessment of whether it's a whole company, a line of business, a department, a core function, and be honest with themselves about what is and isn't working is a mechanism that allows you to make strategic decisions that you could feel confident in. Now, they're not always going to be right, but at least you went in educated about what it is you needed to solve for. I think that a lot of times people in my position will come into an organization and they know that they were hired in order to create change and growth, and you immediately, do a reorg or change people's titles or something that feels very dramatically different. But if that's not informed by problems that it's really solving, it feels just like optics. It doesn't feel substantive. So I was just very focused on making sure that any changes or enhancements that I wanted to implement would be driven by and informed by problem solving.
Interesting. Um, so assume I don't know what a SWOT is. Can you explain what a SWOT is and when I use it? So like for
Sure.
when I say when, like assume I just bought a company or I'm running a company, I hit some kind of wall. Like when do I use it?
Right. Yeah. So I think it's a great planning tool. Is where I think. I mean, I guess you could use it in a romantic relationship as well if you wanted to. But so it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I think that why it really works in business is because strength and weaknesses, the first two pieces of the analysis, are really allowing you to look at the business intrinsically and saying, okay, what about this business at this moment, whether it's you're doing a plan, an annual plan where you need to forecast revenue for the next year, or you're doing it on a quarterly basis, right? So it allows you to like collect retrospective data, current data, really, really look at your brand or this entity for what it is that is helping your business or not, or hurting your business, right? So, but they're more intrinsically and internally focused, if you will. Opportunities and threats are all externally focused, right? And so what I think is really important as a business leader is yeah, there are things that are broken on the inside, but a company like that could find ways to take advantage of market opportunities and grow really well, and no one would even know that that weakness existed, right? So a lot of what's really cool about SWOT is that it's 4 different elements that all have equal weight. And if, for example, your opportunities way outweigh your threats, both of which are externally focused, in other words, a market opportunity or a new audience opportunity that you can go after, as long as you sort of lean the business into those opportunities and those strengths, you could probably do okay without directly addressing some of the weaknesses and threats. I would say the way I like to use it is first to level set, right? To purely look at what the business, it's looking at yourself in the mirror. Like what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the outside opportunities for me to take advantage of? And what are the threats that I need to protect myself from? And by putting all of that out on the table, to me, those are your ingredients for what your plan should be. So if I mentioned reorg before, in the case of Converge, when I did a SWOT on the whole business, it became very clear to me that we were operating in silos that was creating confusion, inefficiency, and I think the inability for us to communicate in a consistent way across our clients. So the reorg that I put in place was a direct result of the analysis I did in the SWOT. And I think that that's how you know a SWOT is working, whereas it can clearly pinpoint where the problem sits, so that as an individual who's in the position or whose responsibility it is to fix it, you have a sense of what needs to be fixed, and then you have a way to measure if your fix worked.
Okay. And so this is very, very strategic.
Yes.
And
sorry.
and I love that. But say I run a $1 million business, a $5 million business.
Right.
And I know, like on Twitter, there's these heated debates, and LinkedIn, there's heated debates between tactics versus strategy.
Yeah.
And the biggest argument for tactics is, hey, I run a $1 million business, a $5 million business. If I spend all this time making a strategy, all this time making a plan, 2 different things, by the way.
Yeah. Yes.
That's going to change next week. Right.
Right.
Why should I do this? Why should I do strategy?
Yeah, I think strategy can use a rebrand, if you ask me. It's a word that I think even as someone who is a strategist, and you seem to be somebody who appreciates that from your own background, I think that particularly for people who are in highly entrepreneurial positions where all they're thinking about is tomorrow, right? Like, what can I do now that's going to make tomorrow better, more effective, more profitable? It has a bad reputation for being time consuming and maybe not so actionable. And if I hire someone to do it, it's going to be super expensive, and I'm going to get a PowerPoint at the end. Like that is sort of the reputation it has. To me, I think about strategy more as a lens through which to run a business or to live a life, to be honest, which is and you can apply a SWOT or any kind of strategic methodology for short-term impact and for longer-term impact, right? I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. And I think that, if I were running a $1 million business, yes, of course I need tactics, but there's nothing wrong with asking myself, as a way to screen those tactics, is this supporting my overall vision for the business? Is this getting me where I ultimately want to go with this business? Or is this something that's potentially distracting to me and taking me off course? So I think that, unfortunately, people are very binary. They're like, it's either strategy or tactics. I think there's a way to do tactics strategically. Like, think about what is the overall thing that is going to drive your business, this quarter or this month. And then if there's a list of 10 tactics, asking yourself, do these tactics ladder up to that ultimate vision? And to me, that's just a way of, it's to me, it's not a different path. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of bringing these two pieces together so that you always have a litmus test for yourself as a leader to say, I should or shouldn't do that, because it doesn't pass. I don't know how else you determine what tactics to use if you're not measuring it up against some barometer that has to do with the ultimate goal of the business. So it acts as I think it acts as a good a decision maker tool on is that a yay or a nay?
And so what would you do then? Say you're running $1 million business, $5 million business, and you're trying to figure out what's the goal for the business, right? Which changes pretty frequently. How would you structure the process from what activities or strategic choices fall under the strategy section? And then help me distinguish that from a plan, because a lot of people confuse a strategy from a plan.
Right. That's a great, yeah.
Yes. And I think a lot of people are scared because they think of a plan and it freaks them out because a plan takes forever to make, right?
Right.
And then the last nugget I'll throw in there is also, where does prioritization fall into that process?
So, I mean, in my career, something that I've always done, both out of need, but also because I really enjoy it, is I've always done consulting for smaller independent clients. Because I think that no matter what your role is, how senior you become, the closer you are to the work itself and to seeing how the work plays out in the real world, the more effective you're going to be, even if you don't touch the work every single day in your real job, right? And so the work that I've done with entrepreneurial clients all throughout my career has been unbelievably helpful in sort of testing out and recognizing the value of some of these, one would call it, more institutional approaches to growth and strategy that you would say big brands would take advantage of. I think that the way there's always going to be, and I think that this is also where $1 million companies don't realize, even if you're a $100 million company, there's always triaging going on, right? There's always 10 things on the list that the company wants to do and execute. But at the end of the day, there's only enough people, resources, money, and time to focus on 3. So there's always going to be a prioritization exercise. I think that, for an entrepreneur in today's market, which is obviously a really both exciting and challenging one, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, it feels like. I think that being able to gain a deep understanding of the dynamics of what's driving revenue quickly and sustainably. Like, there's going to be, like in our business, we have some clients that are very, very high revenue, but the profitability is a problem because it takes a lot of people to service them.
Right.
And so, but we're not going to say, oh, I don't want to work on that. But we just know, right, that the investment is going to be different. Where there are other clients where they're very deliverables based, and it's, we have a formula for how we can very, very productively deliver what they need, and the margin might be much better for us. So I think that as a leader of whether it's a $1 million to $100 million business, arming yourself with information, with knowing your data well, I really think it's important. Sorry, Excel spreadsheets, not my favorite thing, but like, I can't do my job without knowing what's driving my business. And so being able to uncover, the cost benefit opportunity of certain tactics versus others from the past, and then looking at the levers that are driving your business today as a mechanism to determine what is going to have the quickest, most powerful impact on the business going forward is going to be in the data. It's going to be in your familiarization with what happened in the past. And so I think that we all have to play the strategist at some point. I think that, of course, the $1 million CEO can't spend 6 months on it and wait to get a report. He or she has to find really quick ways to hack it and pull out of it, like I always like to say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Find good enough ways in that feel like they're based on enough data and information that you feel comfortable with, and go out and test it, put it into market, see what happens, and fail fast. If it doesn't work, the beauty is you can always go back and learn something from that and apply it. And I think that's also something that's very unique about the environment we're living in today, specifically with how much business is digital. Is back in my day, before you were born and probably half your half your audience was born, I worked in an advertising agency that was pre-commercial internet. If you made a big decision, you couldn't fail fast. You failed slowly and painfully because there was no taking it back. Whereas today, if I decided I wanted to be an influencer tomorrow or start a product company tomorrow, I could, create a Wix site and test it and see how it responded in search and learn about my audience. And if the sort of core fundamentals of the business were not proving out to be what I thought they would be, I can just pull it before I've sort of invested a whole bunch of money. So I think taking advantage of access to live data and live environments as a learning tool is also strategic. Setting up those kinds of tests for your business, creating like a little playground of test and learn within, whether it's how you're promoting something or the way you're creating little task forces of people that have never worked together before, and seeing how it actually works in real life before committing is a great way to sort of stress test some of the thinking.
Yeah, I think you have a fascinating combination of the two worlds, where I think the strategists think forever and don't do anything, and the tacticians do things without thinking about it. Like, you have this good blend of let's think and fail fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What does that look like at Converge? Like, what does that look like when you took over the company?
Oh my gosh, whoa. So I will say it's a work in progress because it's cultural, right? So I think, my career, half my career was at marketing services agencies, but the other half were at startups. And I think what taught me what you just said is the commercial internet would not exist today after it's probably alive for like 30 something years all in. I was a pioneer, it was called, in 1997 when I was the second employee of the very first social media platform of the time, which doesn't exist anymore. It was called 6 Degrees, based on the theory of 6 degrees of separation. And what that experience taught me was that, and I don't think this existed in the traditional business world, is that success is a combination of multiple factors. It's how much time it takes you to get something done, the impact that has either in terms of consumer response and behavior and in terms of revenue. At the time, no one cared about revenue. But anyway, you can't have all the things at the same time. Like, you can't make, you can't, what they say, you can't get the project done for like the budget you want and the time when you got to sort of pick which one, right? And so what we had to learn the hard way is when you were building digital products back then, which was much more expensive and time consuming, there's something called feature creep, where you start thinking about what this thing could be, and there's 17 things you want to build. And we would have to pull back and say, guys, if we're going to hit this launch date, then we're going to have to get really, really honest about the 2 or 3 features that are absolutely necessary and cut everything else. So the whole kill your babies idea sounds terrible, but I learned that discipline really, really early in my career. And although the stakes were different when you're at a startup in the commercial internet in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think that the theory, the practice of it applies to any business, and it's something we're trying to do with Converge. So we have, a portfolio of clients that we deal with every single day. And I'm not saying we're using them as guinea pigs, but we are continuously offering different ways of communicating with them, of delivering value with them. And whatever we learn from those experiences, we try to share that with our other clients, and apply those new thinkings and make it so that it doesn't feel like we're a big old agency, but we are the small independent performance agency that we are. So it has to be a fit with our clients. So I think there's that. I think that with new business, you get to do a lot more of it because they're not your client yet. So you're trying to win them, right? So you can try all kinds of things, of course, based on what you know is going to work, and see and learn from what is and isn't working. So, as we speak today, I sat in a 3-hour meeting with my leadership team looking at, what we learned over the last 6 months when it came to new business and in terms of current clients, and asked ourselves the question, are we organized in the right way, operationally, in order to get to this next level of growth? What could we do? What could we test, to say to ourselves, well, we could do it this much better if we had this or that. And so I think you constantly have to be willing to question a decision that you felt really good a month ago, just because, to your point earlier, you have more data now to look at, and the world probably shifted a bit. And so let's say, does this still make sense, or do we need to adjust it a bit? And if so, what does that look like? What will that cost me in terms of time or people or quality of delivery? And then make a decision about where you think the biggest bang for your time and buck is going to be, I guess, to use a cliche.
Yeah, interesting. And so let's use that example. And so you looked at the last 6 months and you say, hey, what did we learn, right? What's our goal? And then are we structured or organized the right way to hit that goal?
Right.
What was that process like for you? Like, are you guys, like, what is the goal? Are you guys structured the right way? Do you have to do a reorg? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so where we are right now, first of all, I'm not scared. I think that, and I say this to my team all the time, being part of a high growth enterprise is not for everyone. It's not. You have to have a certain constitution. You almost need to be excited by waking up in the morning and not knowing what might happen. I think there are people that are very undone by that. I think there are people that are very challenged by that, and the stress is not worth the experience. I think there are people that are excited by change and innovation and unpredictability in a certain way, and are also very, very much invested in where is our business world, communication world going? Yes, we have to say AI every single day, so there we go. And so I think that what we're looking at right now is, when I came in a year and a half ago, we had never really done growth. We didn't really have a growth platform. We didn't have a way to monitor our leads and our conversions. We didn't have collateral to sell. So all of that got built in the first 4 to 6 months. And we're already in 2 or 3 revisions of that based on, real life use of those materials and seeing what did and didn't work. Where we are right now is taking a real look at 6 months of selling, and then getting much more focused on answering the question, who are we for? I think that a lot of early stage companies, whether they're in the services or product business, are saying, well, we're for everyone because they'll take revenue from anywhere. The discipline of saying we're really for fill in the blank means you're saying I'm not for everyone else. And we don't want to close an opportunity before we feel like we tested it. But we're really trying to say to ourselves, as a small independent agency, we're probably better fit for small and mid-sized companies than we are for large enterprise companies. It's just the reality. From a competitive perspective, from a resource perspective, the people that are going to be excited about working with us, a 60-person really nimble agency, is going to be folks like us that are entrepreneurs, that are looking to grow quickly, that are excited about what the future of digital is going to bring, are looking for shortcuts and hacks to get you there versus perfection, and are willing and excited about learning as you go. And so what we're finding is our ICP, which in the world of B2B is your ideal client profile, is probably there are certain verticals we're interested in that we think are also ideal, but from a size and maturity perspective, we're probably more for growing businesses versus, name like Coca-Cola, Microsoft, United. We're probably more for the company that's 2 levels under them that wants to be that when they grow up. And we want to be the agency that helps them grow up. So I think being able to answer the question, who are you really for? And then catering your strategies and tactics against said audience is something that is a big part of where we are from a maturity perspective.
Interesting. Because I imagine, okay, so imagine you have a service business, you have 1 to 5 million revenue, and you're trying to figure out your positioning.
Right.
I imagine most folks in that space are like, once I figure out that positioning, like I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Which you're clearly telling us that's not true. We have 60 people and we're still figuring out our positioning, right?
Yep.
And so how did you realize that you had a positioning problem? And what are like tactically, what are the steps that you're taking to fix the positioning problem?
Right. So I knew that I had to upgrade our brand identity and positioning as part of the transformation that would enable us to go out in the market and be a company that sells its services. So I knew I had to do it. I would have liked more time, to be honest, but I didn't have the luxury of time. So as I said earlier, what I learned from my internet startup world is you can't, like I said earlier, you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So we went through a process and we landed somewhere that I felt good enough about. I really did. I felt like this is close enough to who we are and who we should be. It's polished, professional, high energy. It checks a lot of boxes. Let's go see how it works, and we went out there and we used it and we gained learnings immediately. And then I brought on a new board member and who's like a legend in the ad biz. We brought on some new clients and the market continued to shift. And we looked at each other and we said, okay, well, it's not wrong. Our position is not wrong. It's just maybe it's not specific enough, or maybe it is not focused enough on the who we're going after, or those specific problems that client X versus client Y are focused on. And if we have lower awareness than like a big agency that are owned by big holding companies like WPP or Publicis, and we're up against those kinds of we're in the same industry as those agencies. Obviously, we need to be more specific in order to break through. And so I think that the market will tell you if your positioning is working. I'm of course going to know a lot about what I think works, but ultimately the customer is always right. And if it's not working hard enough at converting or at gaining attention, then it's on us to quickly look at what we have and say, we should probably think about revising, optimizing, enhancing. So I look at it more like it's a tool and we're sharpening, like it's a knife and we're just continuing to sharpen the blade. I don't think it's like changing it. It's a dramatic change, but those small changes have a lot of impact when you're trying to create a partnership with a new client.
And what, if we take a step back, what is positioning? And like, I guess what I mean by that is I heard you mention brand. Is brand part of positioning? Like where does the lines of positioning end and where does brand and others kind of start?
Right. Oh my God. Again, another like definitely you could go on so many LinkedIn conversations about brand versus demand, brand versus direct response. I have a lot of opinions about that. So positioning is very simply answering the question, and there's even like a Mad Lib that you can use. That's a great sort of hack of how you come up with positioning, but it is product X or service X, whatever the brand name is for which audience, and the audience can't be every human being that is living and breathing. Let's be honest. There's probably 2 or 3 products in the world that are for everybody, and toilet paper is one of them, right? They're mostly everything else we buy, particularly in this country, is much more targeted, right? Okay, so who are we for? What is the unique value that we deliver? What problem are we trying to solve of said audience? And how do we do it different from our competition? So if you can answer those 4 things super clearly, that's a positioning. That sentence is a positioning. Now the question is, how do I take that sentence? And this is where brand comes in. How do I articulate, visualize, communicate that idea in a less clunky sentence? Right? And so where brand comes in is in the ability to take this idea that maybe seems very internally focused and come up with a way that's more artful that will get people excited. So if you take something obvious like if you take Apple, right? That would usually be one of the brands that people would pick, right? And you look back even 30, 40, 50 years to how it came to be, its whole positioning was about empowering average human beings to feel like they can make anything using their products, right? So democratizing technology, if you will, right? And then giving people the tools that were seamless and easy. People always just say, it just works. I open my Mac and it just works, right? And I know people will argue about the difference between PC and Mac, but at the end of the day, that was their North Star. If you look at the way they communicate at every single level, even today, I think that they are laddering up to that. Now, are they saying those words? No, absolutely not. But if you look at product design and the way they release products and the ease of which the user experience is always baked in, I think that you see brand living even at the performance level. Think about the store. The store is the bottom of the funnel. People are buying things, right? Or touching things. And yet it is a direct reflection of the ethos of, I'm going to make this easy, accessible, and I'm going to make you feel like a powerful artist just by interacting with my product. And I think they deliver on that. And I think that that's why people still wait online for their products when they don't really have to. So I think that even if you're running a $1 million or, $1 to $5 million size business with big growth dreams, the ability to really have a conversation with yourself or your partner or somebody that maybe does this for a living, to answer the question, what makes me special, and for whom is that specialness going to be of greatest value? And then how do I bring that to life across all my touch points? Again, it gives you like guardrails of which, is that tactic going to work? It's the same thing we were saying earlier in the conversation. Yeah. Is that tactic on brand? Is it supporting what I'm trying to accomplish as a business longer term, or is it not? Is it maybe neutral, which maybe you'll do it if it's neutral, because if it's not hurting you, that's okay. But I think it's just a great way to keep yourself in check as you are forced to make a lot of decisions in a short period of time. It's a lot of pressure. And sometimes we need a way to determine if we're on the right track or not.
Got it. Okay, let me play that back. So positioning, it sounds like, is the intersection of 3 things. Who's the customer?
Yeah.
Very specifically. Mm-hmm. What's their problem?
Yes.
And then how do you solve that problem, parentheses, better than everyone else, right?
Perfectly said.
What does the parentheses mean? when you say differently than others, is it different? Does the service has to be different? Can I have the same service but do customer experience different? Can I have them both the same but just really do amazing on marketing? Like,
Yes.
what does different mean?
All of that is true. So it's an amazing question. And we're always plagued with like, what's competitive differentiation or competitive superiority for that matter. So I think two things. One is, this is where you can say to yourself, who am I for, right? Because ultimately, what you want to be able to say is that because of the ethos of my brand and the way I deliver my product or service, I'm actually perfect for this one audience and they'll never go anywhere else, right? You would love to be able to say that. But in a world where you can't, I think it doesn't necessarily mean, like if you went back to the Apple example, right? A lot of people will say that Androids and other types of products, PCs, function better than Macs and iPods and et cetera. But there's something, to your point earlier, user experience, marketing and packaging, right? A feeling of it being for you. In other words, you're part of a tribe or a community. I know that that's maybe not the most politically correct way to say it, but we're living in a time where we want to feel connected. And a lot of people feel connected by by people sharing fandom for the same product or Marvel character, etc. So I think that differently than anyone else does not necessarily mean better or cheaper, but it could be something as simple as packaging, convenience, user experience, the way it makes someone feel, right? Going beyond the functionality of the product or service and more of the high touch things that we don't think about, right? And that may be enough in the world we're living in, because there are very few categories where there's a clear winner that is universally accepted, right? We still live in a Coke and Pepsi world and people will have crazy arguments about which is better. But at the end of the day, they're different from each other. So I think if you can hook in that differentiation with the audience it's for, I think that's where the magic starts to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, you can do positioning at pretty much any level, right?
Oh,
Because you can
sure.
do positioning for Converge as a whole, or you could do positioning for a client. You could also do positioning for like a marketing campaign, right? Um, absolutely. And people don't do this. Like I have these conversations with, call it 15 agency owners a week, let's just say. And you have to be one of the most strategically minded people I speak to.
I'll take that as
Let's take it as a compliment. So I imagine this kind of positioning you guys must do for your clients' campaigns. That's
yeah.
got to be one of the reasons that you guys have the results you do. Like maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think maybe they don't call it positioning. They call it that word that you don't like, that we were talking about at the beginning, which is they call it what's the campaign or messaging or media strategy. But it's the same idea, which is I'm about to spend, I don't know, $100,000, $1 million, using these channels to convince this audience that they should click through and engage with my client's brand. If I don't have a reason why that's driving that action, then we all know what's going to happen, right? We all know that there will be no click through. There will be no impact to the kind of behavior that we're being measured against. So I think that, we have folks staffed at the agency that are, creative strategists, where their job is to figure out to your point, what is the messaging positioning for this campaign need to be? From a media perspective, what should the journey of somebody who's buying I'm trying to think of a perfect example. Let's say, selecting internet connection for their home. What are they going to do before they actually make that decision? And how can we be part of that journey in a way that's going to ensure that we end up being the winner? So I think that upfront thinking is a key part of the way we design campaigns, despite size of agent, size of client, what they're trying to do. If you don't, like, as they say, measure twice, cut once, I think you haven't taken as much of the risk out of the proposition and investment as you should. And we take our clients' media investment really seriously, and we want to make sure that we're doing whatever upfront we can to ensure that they're going to see the best return. So we're engaging in this every day in our actual client work. That's what we're delivering.
Of course, of course. Okay, last question. So you inherited this business when it was stuck and you had to turn it around, right? So imagine you're speaking to a listener who had just bought a business, or their business is stuck and they need to turn around too. What do you wish you could tell yourself when you went back and when the bank handed you Converge and said, like, hey, please turn this thing around? What do you wish you could tell yourself?
Oh my God, that's an amazing question, but a really, really hard one. This may not sound like a business aha, but I think that a lot of us tend to judge our performance based on, did it fail or did it succeed within a certain time period? And I think that this is tougher than I thought it was going to be. And I think it's very easy to lose confidence along the way when things don't go as quickly or as the way that you imagine. So what I would say to myself is, do not take any of this personally, and respect that the inheriting of a living and breathing business entity that was around for 20 years before you, the ability to be able to create transformation and have that transformation impact the bottom line is not for the faint of heart, and it's also not one and done. And so give yourself grace and recognize that what you're trying to do is, imagine what could be when it's not right in front of you. And I think being an entrepreneur or a builder versus a keeper of a stable business, it requires, as I said earlier, different kinds of constitution. And I would say to myself, if you're a real builder, keep the faith and you'll get there. But that it's not always going to look like you made progress on a spreadsheet sometimes. The progress could be small, and it could be something that's more personal, or with somebody that is an employee and something that they were able to accomplish. So really being able to, I tell this to my team all the time, to enjoy the climb, because otherwise, it could be a much harder, it could be a much harder path than you thought, because you're looking for the big wins in order to give you confidence and excitement. And ultimately, it's the small, little incremental wins that really show that you're making progress.
It's such a hard journey. Like, it can be so demoralizing, but at the same time, so rewarding.
Yeah. It's like I say to people, I'm having the most fun I ever had, but I'm also under more pressure than I've ever been. So it's, I would say it's cognitive dissonance, the ability to hold many competing ideas simultaneously and it not get the best of you.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this has been so fun. Where can people find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I guess like everybody else, I'm actually currently not following any of my other socials because it was crushing my soul. And so I have a LinkedIn profile, which I guess is linkedin.com/Shoshana Winter. If you are a smaller mid-sized business looking for a marketing partner that will help you grow quickly, we're convergemarketing.com, and we have a great team of 60 people mostly based in New York City, but all over the country. And we'd be happy to talk to you, even if it doesn't turn into anything. And yeah, I think I think that's it. I think those are probably the best ways.
Amazing, amazing. Thanks for coming on. This has been fun.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Appreciate it.